Good morning, dear students. In the previous class, we have talked about classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Today, we are going to learn something about observational learning. Well, you must have seen that a child learns to make and different facial expressions by observing his or her mother or father. A child learns to walk and talk through observation. A new employee is always punctual after seeing a colleague getting fired for being late. These are only some of the examples of observational learning that occur on a daily basis. Well, observational learning starts occurring from the early stages of life. A child learns to interact with other people by observing their parents. The parents are not teaching this behavior directly, but the child nevertheless imitates different actions by watching others. In psychology, this is exactly what observational learning means. It is a type of learning that occurs as a function of observing, retaining, and replicating novel behavior executed by others. Earlier, this form of learning was called imitation. In this kind of learning, human beings learn social behavior, therefore, it is sometimes called social learning. In many situations, individuals do not know how to behave. They observe others and emulate their behavior. This form of learning is known as modeling. We see examples of observation learning around in our social life. Fashion designers employ tall, gracious young girls and tall, smart, and well built young boys for popularizing clothes of different designs and fabrics. People observe them on television, through newspapers and advertisements. They imitate these models, observing superiors and likable persons and then emulating their behavior in a novel situation is a common experience. A lot of research has been done on observational learning by Bandura and Walters and his colleagues. In order to understand the nature of observation learning, let's refer to a study conducted by Bandura. In one of his experiments, Bandura, he showed a film of 5 minutes duration to children. The film shows that in a large room, there are numerous toys, including a large-sized Bobo doll. Now, a grown-up boy enters the room and looks around. The boy starts showing aggressive behavior towards the toys in general and in particular towards the Bobo doll, who he is hitting the doll, throwing it on the floor, kicking, and sitting on it. This film has three versions. In one version, a group of children see the boy being rewarded and praised by an adult for being aggressive. In the second version, another group of children see the boy being punished for his aggressive behavior. Whereas in the third version, the third group of children are not shown the boy being either rewarded or punished. After viewing a specific version of the film, all the three groups of children were placed in an experimental room in which similar toys are placed. The children are allowed to play with the toys. The groups were secretly observed. Interestingly, the conclusion was that the children who saw the aggressive behavior being rewarded were the most aggressive. The children who had seen the aggressive model being punished were the least aggressive. Thus, in observational learning, the observers acquire knowledge by observing the model's behavior, but the performance is influenced by model's behavior being rewarded or punished. You must have noticed that children observe the behavior of adults at home and during social ceremonies and functions. They enact the adults in their plays and games. Actually, they enact them in their games what they have observed in society, on television, or read in the books. Children learn most of the social behavior by observing and emulating the adults. Now we come to the next topic, which is cognitive learning. Some psychologists they view learning in terms of cognitive processes. Thus, in cognitive learning, there is a change in what the learner knows rather than what he does. Cognitive psychologists have developed approaches that focus on such processes that occur during learning rather than concentrating on only stimulus response or stimulus stimulus connections. This form of learning shows up in insight learning and latent learning. So, cognitive theories of learning, my dear students, emphasizes upon the concept that learning is a process of discovering and understanding relationships and of organizing and finding significance in the sensory experiences around by the external situation. Wolfgang Kohler and his contribution cannot be ignored, especially in the case of the insight learning. He was a psychologist who conducted experiments on insight learning that was observed in animal behavior. Kohler demonstrated a model of learning which could not be readily explained by conditioning. He performed a series of experiments with chimpanzees that involved solving complex problems. He placed chimpanzees in an enclosed play area where the food was kept outside their reach. Tools like poles and boxes were placed. The chimpanzees rapidly learned how to use a box, to stand up on a pole, or to move the food in the direction. In this experiment, learning did not take place as a result of trial and error and reinforcement, but came about in sudden flashes of insight. The chimpanzees would roam around the enclosure for some time, and suddenly they would stand on a box, grab a pole, and strike a banana which was outside their normal reach. The chimpanzee exhibited what Kohler called the insight learning, the process by which the solution to a problem suddenly becomes clear. That is called insight learning. Next, we come to is the latent learning, which was developed by E.C. Tolman. Tolman basically studied rats, thus resulting in a theory called latent learning. A new behavior is learned but not demonstrated until and unless the reinforcement is provided for displaying it. Tolman made an early contribution to the concept, and he put two groups of rats in a maze and gave them an opportunity to explore, as you can see from this particular slide. In one group, the rats found food at the end of the maze and soon learned to make their way rapidly through it. On the other hand, the rats in the second group were not rewarded and showed no apparent signs of learning. But later, when these rats were reinforced, they ran through the maze as efficiently as the rewarded group. Thus, Tolman contended that the unrewarded rats had learned the layout of the maze early in their explorations, but they never displayed their latent learning until and unless the reinforcement was provided. So, which shows that the rats developed a cognitive map of the maze, as you can see from this particular slide, how they have developed a mental representation of the environment or the maze. They have developed it naturally without any kind of reinforcement. Thank you and have a good day.